From the Innocence of Father Brown, The Secret Garden, Part 2. Valentin went down on his hands and knees and examined with his closest professional attention the grass and ground for some 20 yards round the body, in which he was assisted less skilfully by the doctor and quite vaguely by the English lord. Nothing rewarded their groveling except a few twigs, snapped or chopped into very small lengths, which Valentin lifted for an instant's examination and then tossed away. "Twigs," he said gravely. "Twigs and a total stranger with his head cut off. That is all there is on this lawn." There was an almost creepy stillness, and then the unnerved Galloway called out sharply, "Who's that? Who's that over there by the garden wall?" A small figure with a foolishly large head drew waveringly near them in the moonlit haze. Looked for an instant like a goblin, but turned out to be the harmless little priest whom they had left in the drawing-room. "I say," he said meekly, "there are no gates to this garden, do you know?" Valentin's black brows had come together somewhat crossly, as they did on principle at the sight of the cassock. But he was far too just a man to deny the relevance of the remark. "You are right," he said. "Before we can find out how he came to be killed, we may have to find out how he came to be here. Now listen to me, gentlemen. If it can be done without prejudice to my position and duty, we shall all agree that certain distinguished names might well be kept out of this. There are ladies, gentlemen, and there is a foreign ambassador. If we must mark it down as a crime, then it must be followed up as a crime. But till then, I can use my own discretion. I am the head of the police. I am so public that I can afford to be private. Please heaven, I will clear every one of my own guests before I call in my men to look for anybody else. Gentlemen, upon your honor, you will none of you leave the house till tomorrow at noon. There are bedrooms for all. Simon, I think you know where to find my man Ivan in the front hall. He is a confidential man. Tell him to leave another servant on guard and come to me at once. Lord Galloway, you are certainly the best person to tell the ladies what has happened and prevent a panic. They also must stay. Father Brown and I will remain with the body." When this spirit of the captain spoke in Valentin, he was obeyed like a bugle. Dr. Simon went through to the armory and routed out Ivan, the public detective's private detective. Galloway went to the drawing-room and told the terrible news tactfully enough, so that by the time the company assembled there, the ladies were already startled and already soothed. Meanwhile, the good priest and the good atheist stood at the head and foot of the dead man, motionless in the moonlight, like symbolic statues of their two philosophies of death. Ivan, the confidential man with the scar and the mustaches, came out of the house like a cannonball, and came racing across the lawn to Valentin, like a dog to his master. His livid face was quite lively with the glow of this domestic detective story, and it was with almost unpleasant eagerness that he asked his master's permission to examine the remains. "Yes, look if you like, Ivan," said Valentin, "but don't be long. We must go in and thrash this out in the house." Ivan lifted the head, and then almost let it drop. "Why," he gasped, No, it isn't. It can't be. Do you know who this man is, sir?" "No," said Valentin indifferently. "We'd better go inside." Between them, they carried the corpse to a sofa in the study, and then all made their way to the drawing-room. The detective sat down at the desk quietly, and even without hesitation. But his eye was the iron eye of a judge at assize. He made a few rapid notes upon paper in front of him, and then said shortly, "Is everybody here?" "Not Mr. Brain," said the Duchess of Mount St. Michael, looking around. "No," said Lord Galloway in a hoarse, harsh voice, "and not Mr. Neil O'Brien, I fancy. I saw that gentleman walking in the garden when the corpse was still warm." "Ivan," said the detective, "go and fetch Commandant O'Brien and Mr. Brain. Mr. Brain, I know, is finishing a cigar in the dining room. Commandant O'Brien, I think, is walking up and down the conservatory. I am not sure." The faithful attendant flashed from the room, and before anyone could stir or speak, Valentin went on with the same soldierly swiftness of exposition. "Everyone here knows that a dead man has been found in the garden, his head cut clean from his body. Dr. Simon, you have examined it. Do you think that to cut a man's throat like that would need great force, or perhaps only a very sharp knife?" "I should say that it could not be done with a knife at all," said the pale doctor. "Have you any thought," resumed Valentin, "of a tool with which it could be done?" "Speaking with modern probabilities, I really haven't," said the doctor, arching his painful brows. "It's not easy to hack a neck through, even clumsily, and this was a very clean cut. It could be done with a battle axe, or an old headman's axe, or an old two-handed sword." "But, good heavens!" cried the Duchess, almost in hysterics, "there aren't any two-handed swords and battle axes round here." Valentin was still busy with the paper in front of him. "Tell me," he said, still writing rapidly, "could it have been done with a long French cavalry saber?" A low knocking came at the door, which, for some unreasonable reason, curdled everyone's blood like the knocking in Macbeth. Amid that frozen silence, Dr. Simon managed to say, "A saber. Yes, I suppose it could." "Thank you," said Valentin. "Come in, Ivan." The confidential Ivan opened the door and ushered the Commandant Neil O'Brien, whom he had found at last pacing the garden again. The Irish officer stood up disordered and defiant on the threshold. "What do you want with me?" he cried. "Please sit down," said Valentin in pleasant level tones. "Why aren't you wearing your sword? Where is it?" "I left it on the library table," said O'Brien, his brogue deepening in his disturbed mood. "It was a nuisance. It was getting—" "Ivan," said Valentin, "please go and get the Commandant's sword from the library." Then, as the servant vanished, "Lord Galloway says he saw you leaving the garden just before he found the corpse. What were you doing in the garden?" The Commandant flung himself recklessly into a chair. "Oh," he cried in pure Irish, "admiring the moon. Communing with nature, me boy." A heavy silence sank and endured, and at the end of it came again the trivial and terrible knocking. Ivan reappeared, carrying an empty steel scabbard. "This is all I can find," he said. "Put it on the table," said Valentin, without looking up. There was an inhuman silence in the room, like that sea of inhuman silence round the dock of the condemned murderer. The Duchess's weak exclamations had long ago died away. Lord Galloway's swollen hatred was satisfied and even sobered. The voice that came was quite unexpected. "I think I can tell you," cried Lady Margaret, in that clear, quivering voice with which a courageous woman speaks publicly. "I can tell you what Mr. O'Brien was doing in the garden, since he is bound to silence. He was asking me to marry him. I refused. I said in my family circumstances I could give him nothing but my respect. He was a little angry at that. He did not seem to think much of my respect. I wonder," she added with a rather wan smile, "if he will care at all for it now. For I offer it him now. I will swear anywhere that he never did a thing like this." Lord Galloway had edged up to his daughter and was intimidating her in what he imagined to be an undertone. "Hold your tongue, Maggie," he said in a thunderous whisper. "Why should you shield the fellow? Where's his sword? Where's his confounded cavalry?" He stopped because of the singular stare with which his daughter was regarding him, a look that was indeed a lurid magnet for the whole group. "You old fool," she said in a low voice without pretense of piety. "What do you suppose you are trying to prove? I tell you this man was innocent while with me. But if he wasn't innocent, he was still with me. If he murdered a man in the garden, who was it who must have seen, who must at least have known? Do you hate Neil so much as to put your own daughter? Lady Galloway screamed. Everyone else sat tingling at the touch of those satanic tragedies that had been between lovers before now. They saw the proud white face of the Scotch aristocrat and her lover, the Irish adventurer, like old portraits in a dark house. The long silence was full of formless historical memories of murdered husbands and poisonous paramours. In the center of this morbid silence, an innocent voice said, "Was it a very long cigar?" The change of thought was so sharp that they had to look around to see who had spoken. "I mean," said Father Brown from the corner of the room, "I mean that cigar Mr. Brain is finishing. It seems nearly as long as a walking stick." Despite the irreverence, there was assent as well as irritation in Valentin's face as he lifted his head. "Quite right," he remarked sharply. "Ivan, go and see about Mr. Brain again, and bring him here at once." The instant the factotum had closed the door, Valentin addressed the girl with an entirely new earnestness. "Lady Margaret," he said, "we all feel, I am sure, both gratitude and admiration for your act in rising above your lower dignity and explaining the commandant's conduct. But there is a hiatus still. Lord Galloway, I understand, met you passing from the study to the drawing room, and it was only some minutes afterward that he found the garden and the commandant still walking there." "You have to remember," replied Margaret, with a faint irony in her voice, "that I had just refused him, so we should scarcely have come back arm in arm. He is a gentleman, anyhow, and he loitered behind, and so got charged with murder." "In those few moments," said Valentin gravely, "he might really—" The knock came again, and Ivan put in his scarred face. "Beg pardon, sir," he said, "but Mr. Byrne has left the house." "Left?" cried Valentin, and rose for the first time to his feet. "Gone, scooted, evaporated," replied Ivan in humorous French. "His hat and coat are gone too, and I'll tell you something to cap it all. I ran outside the house to find any trace of him, and found one. A big trace, too." "What do you mean?" asked Valentin. "I'll show you," said his servant, and reappeared with a flashing naked cavalry saber, streaked with blood about the point and edge. Everyone in the room eyed it as if it were a thunderbolt, but the experienced Ivan went on quite quietly. "I found this," he said, "flung among the bushes 50 yards up the road to Paris. In other words, I found it just where your respectable Mr. Brain threw it when he ran away." And we're going to pause here, and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.